Are you sick of the same old disability stereotypes? We were too, so we did something about it. Welcome to That Was Unexpected, the Disability Lifestyle podcast for everyone. Brought to you by Youngcare and hosted by me, Lisa Cox. Join our amazing guests as we delve into topics that don't often hit the headlines. So let's do this. Prepare for the unexpected. If you're low vision like me or have other accessibility requirements, check out our show notes. Before we get started, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of land on which we record. We pay respects to the elders, past, present and emerging.
Okay, hello everyone and welcome back to That Was Unexpected. We've just had a Christmas break and it's really good to be back with you all. We hope you all had a fantastic Christmas season, however you chose to spend it. I'm Lisa Cox and today we're joined in the studio by the fabulous Clare Stewart, and she is the brand new CEO at Youngcare. Now you might remember in a previous episode we spoke with Greg, who was the CEO at the time. Clare is the new one. Now welcome to this podcast, Clare.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Really great to have you here. Now, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself, how you came to be the CEO of Youngcare, because you have a tremendous background. You've been a board member at Youngcare for a long time.
I think my journey with Youngcare started in April 2006. Had been living in Sydney for a long time, where I'd been working at a multinational firm called KPMG and had a catastrophic accident and had been down there with doing a lot of recovery and rehab. And I was moving back to Brisbane at the end of 2005, and I sat down with a great friend of mine called Jude Lunn. And Jude's husband was Simon Lockyer, who was the first Youngcare CEO, is the cousin. And she said to me, we had a coffee, and she said, you should get involved with this charity called Youngcare. And I said, oh, what's that? And it just transpired from there. And I think I had a coffee with Simon Lockyer on James Street in New Farm in March 2005. And I started around 2006. I started in April 2006 with Youngcare. And one of my first jobs when I started, and I worked in a voluntary capacity, and Simon and I were in a big room at Cutting Edge, which was one of the other directors, Maddie Lawson's workplace. And we had between us a phone and we had a computer. And that's how we worked for months and months. And we put on the first Bernard Fanning concert with this phone and computer between us. And I started in April 2006. One of my first jobs was to respond to all the emails that came in from that amazing 60 Minutes segment that Youngcare did, that Dave and Chevy did with Tara Brown. And there were 600 or 700 emails that came in. And I think that showed how much, even back in 2006, how Youngcare touched a nation. And what we saw from that episode was a community rally. We saw Brisbane rally, we saw Queensland rally to come together for this incredible cause and to be first out of the blocks, long before SDA, to build those much needed apartments that provided choice and dignity for young people with high care needs. And we raised, by the end of 2007, when we opened those first ever Youngcare apartments at Cinnamon Park, we had raised about $4 million, and that had been on the back of so many people in the community giving so much. People would write in saying, I'm a builder, I can donate some time. I'm a Sparky, I can donate some time. I've got I've got bricks and mortar that I can give you. Like, just people donated the most amazing things and raised funds, and it brought a community together. So that was how I started with them, and was very fortunate to be with Youngcare in those very early years, where it was a family, and it still is, and I think that's what's so great about Youngcare is it's everyone who works here, even 20 years on, and we're coming into our 20th year, is so passionate about the cause and cares. It's not just a job. It's a place where people actually care. And as you said, I've been on the board for about the last 6 or 7 years, and very fortunate again to have been asked to continue that journey and now is starting as CEO, which is a huge honour and privilege, and it's one that I take incredibly seriously, and with everything that we have to look forward to and everything we have to achieve. So I'm very excited.
Well, it's really great to have you here. And you mentioned it very, very briefly in what you were just saying, but there's a pivotal period in your past, and I'm told there was an accident or something like that that you had. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that, what you're comfortable with telling us?
Absolutely. Look, I'm a Brizzy girl, and so I had finished school, had done a Bachelor of Business at UQ, and my dad said to me at the end of the Bachelor of Business, "What are you going to do now?" And he said, and he said, "Why don't you apply to do law?" And so I applied to do law at Bond University, and I got a scholarship because I wasn't from a wealthy family. And so I knew that I'd need some help because to fund that degree. And I got the scholarship and did law at Bond. And at the end of the law degree, which I did in 2 years, I wanted to move to London, but I thought, a good stepping stone is Sydney. And so I moved to Sydney in January 2000 and did my practical completion of my law degree through the College of Law. And I was very fit in those days. As a junior, I played tennis for Queensland, but I used to run 10K every day. And I did that every morning that I was living in Bondi Beach in Sydney. But on the 18th of August 2000, it was a Friday morning, and I was sharing a very modest unit in Bondi with my flatmate, who was a Queenslander and also a med student. And I got out of bed and I looked, a bit overcast today. And that question of should I or shouldn't I go for a jog? And that one decision changed my life in a way I never thought possible, with repercussions that were unimaginable. And I say this a lot, but you get dressed and you go for your jog and you wash your face. And that morning I washed my face and I looked at myself just a little bit longer in the mirror. And I can honestly tell you that the person who's sitting across from you now is not the person who looked at themselves in the mirror on the 18th of August 2000 because of everything that transpired. And I proceeded to go for my usual 10K morning jog. I'm a creature of habit, so it was the same route at the same time. And there was a pedestrian crossing not far from where we lived. And I looked both ways and proceeded to cross. And as I did, a garbage truck rounded the corner and by the driver's own admission failed to see me. He stopped, but on top of me. And both of my legs bore the full weight of the garbage truck. I was trapped for 37 minutes and I was conscious the whole time. And the first thing the garbage truck driver did was he jumped out of his truck and he said, "What can I do for you?" And I said to him, because I was still conscious and able to interact, I said, "You've done enough. You have probably already ruined my life." And that's how I thought. I thought my life was ending that morning on the pavement in Bondi Beach, because I was witnessing these legs that were now legs no more. They had become just puddles of blood, flesh, of tissue that were disintegrating before my eyes. And there was an ambulance that was quite close and came, and they administered enough morphine at the scene to kill a horse. I know that because I ran into one of the first responders many months later, just randomly, and he told me. And I was able to, and the police rescue squad were the ones who were able to lift with giant, like almost footballs, metallic footballs. They were able to lift the truck off my legs. And the whole time I was able to interact with them, I was saying, "This is my parents' number, this is my number, my flatmate's number." And they rushed me to St Vincent's Hospital. I was triage code 1. And I remember speaking to my mum in the ambulance, and I'm an only child, and my parents were living in Toowoomba. My mum was teaching at a little Catholic school in Millmerran, about 100k out of Toowoomba, and they got the call. And she said, "Don't worry, darling, we're driving down." I said, "Driving? Why are you driving?" Because I knew how serious my injuries were. I thought that I wouldn't make it. But at the time, she had only been told that I had broken both legs. And so it wasn't until I rushed into hospital and she rang back, because they said, "Look, preparing Clare for surgery." She said, "Something doesn't sound right here." She rang back and my flatmate was at the hospital, and she got on the phone and said, "No, Mrs. Saltman, they're taking Clare into surgery and they're talking about amputating both her legs." And so my parents, not knowing if they would see their daughter, their only child again, rushed from Toowoomba to Brisbane to get on a plane to fly to Sydney. And I was triage code 1 when I got to the hospital, which means you're either deceased, the patient's deceased, or actively having CPR. And I was rushed into a 13-hour surgery and put in an induced coma. And I woke 3 days later, and my parents were standing by my bed when I woke up. And the first thing I did when I woke up was I said, do I have my legs? And the answer was yes, but. And that but was huge. And so I didn't believe them, so I felt down for my legs to feel that they were still there, and they were. And the second thing I said was, what about my job? Just started at KPMG. I've only been in the workforce 15 weeks. I want to get back to work. What are you doing? They said, you're going to be with us for some time. And it turned out that I was in St Vincent's Public Hospital for 6 months and St Luke's Rehab. Yeah. And I had 37 surgeries on both legs since that time.
So 6 months, were you in St Vincent's the entire time?
I was in St Vincent's until November, and then I got taken to St Luke's Rehab. Then I got a very bad infection, had to go back for more surgery, debridement, because my legs had become, the skin grafts had become infected. Went back to St Luke's for a month's rehab. So I think I was admitted on the 18th of August 2000, and I came out in, I think it was February 2001. Yeah.
Okay, and did you have to use a wheelchair at any stage?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had to, when I was in hospital, there were 2 really significant challenges. The first was dressing changes, because I had lost so much skin and most of my legs are covered in skin grafting. Changing the dressings on that. They used to initially do it in surgery because of the risk of infection. And then as time went on, I'd have it in the ward, but it would take 4 or 5 nurses 2 to 3 hours to do it. And I'd have a shot of morphine and some happy gas to get through it, because they were literally pulling off layers and layers of skin as they pulled off. And I couldn't bear to look at my legs. I couldn't bear to see the damage that had been done. And it was the Olympics around that time, the 2000 Olympics, and we had a TV in the room, and I used to hold a pillow up so I couldn't see. And one particular day I said to the nurses, I think I'll look today. And there's that great line in life that says, tearless grief bleeds inwardly, because I didn't shed a tear that day. I felt like I had been hit I felt like I'd been hit by the truck all over again. Yep. Because of the damage. I was looking at these 2 legs, and when you're 23, you're vain, right? You care about your figure and your physique, and my greatest asset, I thought, was my legs. And to see them to see them now no more, it was incredibly confronting. And the second big challenge I had was learning to walk again. Yeah. Because I had so much damage. I have, of 1.5 artery. I lost, I have 1.5 arteries now on my left leg. I have my back muscle down around one of my legs because I had nothing there. Yeah. I have 2 feet that don't move, a knee that doesn't bend. But it was compound fractures. It was everything that So it was starting to rewire and learn to rewire the body to walk again, especially the legs. It was incredibly painful and difficult. And there were days when I would stand up out of bed and I would take 5 steps, and the next day I'd take 3. I go, God, yesterday I took 5 steps and today I only managed 3. Yeah. And I think that's great. I talk about this a lot. It's so much of life is about that. It often is 3 steps forward and 2 steps back.
That's rehab.
Yeah, but the power of the human spirit is to keep going, to not give in. And so I used to walk up and down the corridors on a walker to practice. And then I'd get back in my wheelchair and I'd go out in the wheelchair. And when I came out of hospital, I was in a wheelchair, and I used to, we were living in Darlinghurst in a unit not far. I had to, because I was going, even when I came out of hospital, I was back there every day. Mm-hmm. So I'd, be happily, I'd have friends, amazing girlfriends who I'd gone to school and university with, would come down and take me out in the wheelchair and do things, and I'd have the 2 planks up so I could have my legs supported, so, for the blood flow. And so that absolutely, I spent time in a wheelchair, and then I spent time in a walker on 2 canes, on 2 crutches. And so it was a slow process.
The reason I asked about the wheelchair and the walker and everything like that was whether you noticed a difference when you're out in public in the wheelchair versus the walker versus on 2 legs walking, the difference in how people perceived you.
I noticed when I was in a wheelchair that the world was not made for disabled people.
It's definitely not.
That even when you're walking down, being wheeled down Oxford Street, you can't even get into shops or things because there's a slight lip. So if you're on your own, you can't do it. If you have to have someone with you, I'd be in clothes stores where you couldn't get down aisles of clothes because the aisles weren't wide enough.
Yeah.
So just little things that people who are fully able take for granted. So, and people looked at you. Well, they looked at me, or from I remember, they sort of looked at me and then they looked away.
Yeah.
And we don't want to have to face that. We don't have to confront that poor girl.
Yeah.
And then, then it was getting into, then it was on 2 canes and 2, a walker then, and then the 2 under the arm for the crutches and then the canes. I remember the worst was cab drivers. I'd be waiting because I'd have to go to rehab every day or go back to the hospital for dressing changes. I'd be waiting there and I'd be on the walker and they'd be like, "Oh, what happened to you?" And then, and I'd be this time I was still so emotionally fragile, I'd be quite teary, and they'd be like, and then I got to a point where I said I fell over or something, and then I fell over at home. And then it'd be like, then I'd get 30 minutes of how most accidents happen in the house and how bad, it's like, God, just people, I saw you hobbling along, like people would say things like that, like just so rude.
Yeah.
They don't mean to be, but it was offensive, so I was, those sort of things stay with you.
It does, and I'm really, really sorry that you had to experience that all of it happened to you. But at the same time, I'm so thrilled that somebody with lived experience is in the position that you're in a CEO role.
Thank you.
So now moving on from that, not that I want to just move on from it in this sort of way, but you have certainly achieved some incredible things since that. In 2020, you became the first female Lord Mayor of Noosa. Yay! Yeah. Congratulations!
Thank you.
Can you tell us how all of that came about?
Yeah, absolutely. So coming back to, I guess, the story of meeting my husband at the Youngcare, at the opening of the Youngcare apartments. I mean, it's just amazing how life works. And he was living in Noosa, and he was a fishmonger. He sells seafood, and we go backward and forward. And I had gone when my case settled, and we fought an insurance company for 6 years, and that's another whole other story. But I went to I did my Master of Laws during my recovery in Sydney, and went to the bar, the Queensland Bar, to practice as a barrister at law. And I was working as a barrister of law, and Cam and I were, dating, and then we got engaged and got married in June 2010 at Noosa. And we moved, and obviously that was I was moving to Noosa to live with Cam, and we had 3 children pretty quickly, 2 boys and a girl who are now 13, 12 and 8. And in 2019, I'd always been interested in politics, but I got pretty serious about the interest. And I had thought about running for the state seat of Noosa, and I'm an LNP member and a very proud one. And I thought about running, but I knew that my little one at the time, Amelia, was only about 3, and I thought my husband this is pre-COVID days, travelling a lot for work. And so I thought, how can I be at home every night for my children? And because I knew, if I was in a state politician, I'd be required to be in Brisbane a lot. But how can I be at home every night and still be involved in politics? And the answer to that came down to local council. And so I decided to run for mayor. And a lot of people in the community, a lot of social media chatter was, who does she think she is? She's never been a councillor. She's never run. She's never been in politics. And they were right. I hadn't been a councillor. I hadn't been in politics. Hadn't been to a council meeting. So and I was running at the time against the incumbent mayor, who had, he had seen the community through bushfire. We just had major bushfires. We were in COVID. He had helped the community champion de-amalgamation, which 80% of plus Noosa supported. He had been a councillor. He was the mayor. So and he drew number 1 on the ballot. So it was a really, really tough race. And we announced in the November 2019, and the election was in the March. And I just thought, I'm going to give it a go. Just show up. The answer's always no unless you ask. So I thought I'd dare to fail. And that's what I talk about a lot, dare to fail. You know, I knew that, and I knew at the end of that campaign that win or lose, I had given it everything. I had left nothing on the table. And it was a really close election. I think I won by 365 votes. And so became the first female mayor of Noosa in the April 2020. So a huge privilege. And I was, the mayor for 4 years there and loved it.
That's awesome. It really is. Yeah. And it shouldn't take until 2020 to get a female mayor, but that's a whole different conversation.
Absolutely.
Now, my beautiful production team have a question for me, and I haven't asked them to explain why I'm asking this because I want it to be a surprise. Tell me about Dear Molly.
So Dear Molly, so coming back to, I guess when I moved to Noosa, I didn't know, my background and my history was Brisbane. I was a Brisbane girl, so my school friends and my uni friends were my group, my tribe, they call it. And so when I moved to Noosa, the kids, I had the children there, and it was somewhat isolating because I didn't know a whole lot of people. And so I thought, wouldn't it be great to start an online platform where women could connect wherever they were? And it's called Dear Molly because my best friend, who I've been best friends, we met at the grade 8 building at All Hallows just down the road here when we were 12 and I'm 47. So we've been best mates for 35 years. Her name's Melissa and she's shortened to Molly. And when she was visiting me in Sydney during my hospital times, we were out one day and we were in Surrey Hills and it's busy. Yeah, and I was on my walker at the time and I could, it took me 10 minutes to cross the road. And she walked out in front. She is funny, but she walked out and she said, "Claire, you've already been hit. I'll take the next hit for you." And she proceeded to stop the traffic. This is in Surrey Hills, Sydney, to help me walk across the road.
Yeah.
And so I always thought, wouldn't it be great that everyone had a Molly in their life? And so it was a play on Dear, Dr. Dear, whatever.
Dolly Doctor.
Yeah, Dolly Doctor, that was it. So it was Dear Molly. And that's how it started. And it was about connecting and not just connecting women, but having articles that would inform, educate, empower women. And so that's how it sort of started. And I think we started at the end of 2017. But that's a bit about Dear Molly. But it's been on hold since I became the mayor. Yeah, we pressed pause. I couldn't do it all.
Bring it back now. Now that you're CEO of Youngcare, bring it back.
No, it was great. It was, and initially the articles, it was really good because I got mates to I had a friend who was a black belt in karate. So she wrote an article about self-defense. I had a friend of mine who's a dietitian. She wrote about lunchbox snacks, healthy lunchbox snacks for kids. A lawyer friend of mine wrote about some, family law issues to look out for. So I actually roped in a whole lot of mates early on to write articles. So it was good. Yeah, it was a great time. But that was sort of leading into when I decided to run for mayor.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Now, back to disability and Youngcare, and what sort of changes or positive changes have you seen in the sector, not just since you've been in the CEO position, but in the last several years?
I think what I see with Youngcare, and I think when the boys started it 20 years ago, they were, as I said earlier, they were ahead of their time. They were talking about appropriate and dignified accommodation long before SDAs were, anyone was talking about that. So I think we've always been a leader in the space. I think we're a really recognised and respected brand. I think the brand is so strong. I think people see it and they trust it and they know it. I think it's a brand that is a huge advocate for disability. So there's so much in the last few years I've seen Youngcare really expand. We've got Youngcare Connect, which is so popular. We've got our events which bring our community, which is so grassroots. It goes right back to the very start where I remember talking in a Soroptimist function or a Rotary function, or people would put on morning teas, lunches. That grassroots connection of people feeling connected and involved and a part of something bigger than themselves. Is still very much alive and well today, and that's a huge part is the events, and that's just gone from strength to strength. But there's also the sector now where we are building, amazing accommodation, partnering. I was yesterday down on the Gold Coast where we partnered with Australian Unity for this amazing development where with inclusionary, it's 10% I think of the building, 10 out of 105 units were this accommodation for people with disabilities, and so that's going to house 10 residents and their families. I remember when we started, when those first ever Youngcare apartments were built, we built kitchens in them, and people would say, well, why are you putting kitchens in? It's like, because you may not be able to cook, but you still want to smell the cooking. Yeah. A loved one can still come in and cook for you. Yeah. Your family can come in. So all of these things, we were so far ahead of the rest, back 20 years ago. And I think we still lead the way. I think, it's not just cookie cutter style. It's what people want. It's diverse, it's providing, choice, diversity of living. And I see and the fact that we don't get any government funding from state or Fed, I think is an area where we can really advocate for. I think we can advocate for making the NDIS far more accessible, far easier for people. I mean, you have this juggernaut here, and it's hard for people to access. We've had ladies, people come and talk to us at the board level at Youngcare, saying how hard it is for them to even get the same case manager or to talk to someone or get someone on the other end of the line. So there's that aspect as well. There's the aspect of, we have a lot of people in public housing who should be in SDA accommodation. So let's look at that. How do we, and then let's work with the housing minister to free up, we are doing them a service by freeing up that accommodation to provide more public housing, but let's start providing some more SDA over here. So that's a big one. Looking at the number of people who are living at home with elderly parents and not now needing to go into other accommodation, but at some point in the near future they will. Well, how many people is that? How do we help those people? Looking at our 43, I believe, last year, missed out, 43 grant recipients. Why? How can we get every person who puts in an application for a grant, how can we help them ensure that they are provided for? So if they want to stay at home, we can retrofit that house to ensure. So again, it comes back to, what do our clients want? What do our people want? I think that's really important.
Definitely. And our last CEO, Greg, lovely Greg, in one of our last episodes as well, he said that he wanted his legacy to be getting young people out of aged care or out of Youngcare and into the community. What would you envisage your legacy to be, if you want to wrap it up into one neat sentence?
I think I would like to see my legacy being, no matter what your ability or disability, every person has the same opportunity.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's really nice. This year is huge for Youngcare, with you at the helm especially. But this year is also huge because it's our 20-year anniversary. I just say our because it's my 20-year anniversary as well. But there's the gala ball and a whole heap of other stuff that Youngcare has planned. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, it's so exciting. I mean, coming into, as I said, the launch, the interesting thing was I came on board with Youngcare. As I said, I had that coffee with Simon Lockyer in March, April 2006, but I think it was launched in July 2005. And I actually am pretty sure my husband was at the launch. He knew about Youngcare before I did. So it's super exciting. We do, as you said, we've got, I think we've got a number of builds to finish this year. We've got the gala ball, we've got the capital campaign, we've got the 20th anniversary year. I think the trekking again and all the fundraisers. So I see this year as it's a pivot in a way. It's something that I think Youngcare will springboard off into the future, and I think it's exciting for everyone. I think it's exciting for our community. It's exciting for our supporters, because I think it's an opportunity this year to bring 20 years, some of those people and those supporters initially, we can bring them back and bring them and continue. If many have stayed with us on the journey, and I think of some wonderful corporates who've been with us from the beginning, like Free Hills and Suncorp and these guys. But it's an opportunity to re-engage too. So I think it's so exciting for the organisation. I'm super excited, and I think our whole team is.
Yeah. I think a lot of regular listeners would know this, but where can people find out all about things going on?
Youngcare, www.youngcare.com.au.
Is that the best place? That has all...
And I think Facebook too.
Ticket sales, Facey as well? Yep.
Facebook.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I know that a lot of people with disabilities, that can't speak for everyone, but I know I do, hate to be defined by just the disability or the diagnosis. And in a lot of ways, I suppose, a lot of the able ones don't want to be defined by just a job title, whether it's CEO or something else. So, Clare Stewart, apart from being a Youngcare CEO, what about you? What else do you do in your spare time? Do you have hobbies? What about you apart from the job titles? What can you tell me?
Because someone said to me once, I was doing this, I think I was doing an interview once, and they said, what do you do in your spare time? I said, I don't know, what are your hobbies? And I said, I don't have any hobbies because I don't have time. So I actually, as I said, I am a mother of three. I think I'm really
That's a full-time job.
I think really sadly my children's hobbies are my hobbies. It's mainly, I think taxi driver is probably the biggest one.
Okay.
But I think being, when I was the mayor, it was all consuming. I would get up at 4 a.m. to write a speech because I didn't have a speech writer, so I did all my own speeches. And I did a lot of. We had a lot of support, but we did a lot on our own, and so I did that. So then at night I could be around for the kids, or there was a lot of after hours work. But what I didn't do well was I didn't put the phone down when I got home.
Yeah.
And because when you're a poly, it's fair game.
Yeah.
So you're open, so I'd be on social media reading these things, and I'd be up, in some instances, something had happened, or things in the community, and I'd be reading these things, and it would be all consuming. And I think it was hard. I remember once saying, my husband's the owner of a small business, and I remember saying to him one night, and it sort of put everything in perspective. I said, "Look at this! They're writing mean things about me. Look at this." And I said, "I'm really upset about this. What do you think?" And he goes to me. It was during COVID, and it was really hard. He's in logistics and in COVID, and he said, "What?" I said, "I'm really worried." And he goes, "Why don't you worry about where the next dollar's coming from?" I went, "Okay," and patted myself off and off went to bed. But I think I have to, certainly then I had to put it in perspective. But I think I spent too much time worrying about things that I shouldn't have worried about, to the detriment of spending time with my kids. So I think, I try now, we went around what are the highs and lows once we were out to dinner once, it was a while ago, and one of my kids said, "What's the lows?" "Mummy's always on the phone." I'm like, "Oh God." So I think I just have to try and be a bit more present, and I've tried, and I try and do that, more often than not now. But so my hobbies are, I will try, and I have joined a gym this year in Brisbane to try and get to do some exercise. So that will sort of, and I guess spending time, as I said, originally a lot of my school friends are in Brisbane, so it will be nice to be able to catch up with friends for that midweek dinner, or a girls' dinner or a girls' weekend, where I wouldn't have been able to when I was in Noosa. So I'm looking forward to doing a bit more of that.
Oh, yeah. Cool. And I've got one last question for you. We'll ask all of our guests this question, and just because you're the CEO of Youngcare, I'm not letting you off the hook. What about you or your life is unexpected since that's the name of the podcast? Whether it's I know you don't have any hobbies, and that's understandable. It's fine.
I'm trying to get some. I will have some.
No, I'm the same. Work is my hobby. Work, gym. What about you or your life is unexpected?
I think, the accident was unexpected. And people always say, "Do you regret, do you wish you hadn't gone for a jog that morning?" And the first, your natural response is, of course I wish I hadn't have gone for a jog. But then you think, well, if I hadn't have gone for a jog, I may not have, and the reason I met my husband was through Youngcare. Yeah. I would never have met him otherwise. there is no way. He was 13 years older than me. He lived in Noosa. We had no, we would our paths would never have ever collided. Had it not been for Youngcare. Yeah. So I think, so then you say, well, I wouldn't have been working for Youngcare if I hadn't have had the accident. I wouldn't have been back in Brisbane. I wouldn't have had the opportunity. So, that was unexpected, and life works in mysterious ways.
It
so
does.
Whether or not, so on first you go, well, maybe, everything's meant to be. I think that was obviously, the accident was, completely unexpected. And I think meeting my husband, at the opening that day, I was sitting on the floor with Kate Bonifant, who's one of the founders, Nick Bonifant's sister, and Kate's a great mate of mine. And she said to me that morning of the opening of the Youngcare apartments, Claire, you'll meet the man of your dreams tonight. And I was like, oh, whatever, Kate, come on. Had a laugh. We had a giggle and moved on. But I met Cam at the after party at the Fox Hotel, where he came up and he said, oh, hi. And I was at the bar and I said, oh, look, I just don't talk to randoms. Being so rude. In hindsight, it's so rude. If someone said that to my son, I'd be mortified. And then he said, oh, no, I'm with Youngcare, and I'm a good mate of Dave Connery. He's obviously one of the founders. And I said, oh, it's okay. We can talk to you. So I think the unexpected was, obviously the accident, but then secondary to that was meeting Cam, which, is they're the two big unexpected things.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful. Clare Stewart, it has been such a pleasure to speak with you today. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, Lisa.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to That Was Unexpected. If you liked what you heard and you want to hear more, then hit subscribe wherever you get your fix. Have any questions or topics that you'd love for us to tackle? Great! Email podcast@youngcare.com.au. We can't wait to hear from you. Check out our show notes for transcripts, video recordings, and to find out more about our guests, plus the useful resources they share. You can reach us on Facebook, Instagram, X, and LinkedIn at Youngcare Oz. Let's not forget, an inclusive community is everyone's business. So let's keep working together to break down barriers and smash some stereotypes.